Let me get this up. All right. Hi, everyone. I see you filing in. My name's Dylan. This is Kate. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes just to let anyone in who's a little bit behind. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to get our slides up. Awesome. The chat will be open throughout the entire evening, and when Kate and I are not speaking, we'll be monitoring the chat. So please feel free to put information or questions in there. We're also going to have some dedicated time at the end for all of you to ask questions. Okay. So if you want to ask them now, put them in the chat and we'll be filtering them. And if we think it's relevant to pause immediately and answer it now, we'll totally do that. Otherwise, again, like we said, we'll have dedicated time at the end to answer any questions you have. There will be some participation in this. So you'll see polls pop up throughout the evening, and please answer them. We just want to, it's not like we're asking you anything difficult. It's all about your personal experience and your thoughts about what we're presenting tonight. Okay. But again, please be active in the chat. If you've got things that you want answered, we're here to help. And we want this to be really relaxed and laid back. So I'll just give it about 30 more seconds to see if anyone else comes in. And just as a reminder, this will be recorded. So if you forget anything or you miss anything and you want to review it later, know that this will be sent out. We'll be a resource, and we'll have some information if you want to contact us later down the road to speak with us one-on-one or in a session or something like that. Okay. So why don't we dive right on in? So my name is Dylan Eiger, and I'm one of the tutors here at EMP. I'll give you a more formal introduction soon, but Kate and I are here tonight to talk to you about how to study smarter for the USMLE Step 2. And I'm going to be looking over here just because I have a second monitor, but we've both gone through this process. We know what it's like, and we now tutor it on a regular basis. So tonight's really an opportunity for us to kind of share bits of wisdom as to how we think you can be a great Step 2 taker by being a really smart studier. So I'm going to let Kate introduce herself first, and then I'll follow her, okay?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Kate Dunkelberger. I'm a medical student at Columbia University in New York City. I am in an interesting spot in medical school. I'm taking a research year, have pretty much finished all the med school requirements, but technically going into my last year right now. So pretty fresh off of Step 2 and have been tutoring for a while now and excited to answer any questions that you have.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate. And like I said, my name is Dylan Eiger. I did my medical school at Duke University. I did an MD and a PhD there. My PhD was in biochemistry, and that's when I started tutoring for elite medical prep. I then went up to Boston at the Brigham and Harvard Medical School for residency in internal medicine, and then moved to Philadelphia, where I'm actually originally from. So now I'm a cardiology fellow at the University of Pennsylvania. I think it's great that you have both Kate and I, because Kate is obviously closer to Step 2 than I am, but I've been tutoring it for a longer time just because I'm old. So you'll have two nice perspectives on Step 2 from someone who's taught it for a longer time, but someone who's taken it more recently. Okay. So I'm going to let Kate take over for the next few slides. And again, please feel free to put things in the chat if you have any questions. And again, we'll have a Q&A session at the end for you all to either type in questions or participate. Okay. All right, Kate, take it away.
All right, so here's what we're gonna walk through today. We're gonna share a little bit more about elite medical prep just to kind of frame where we're coming from for you. And then we'll talk about mindset of studying, mindset of prepping for Step 2 and of this phase of medical training. We'll touch on goal setting and some principles of that. Then talk about gathering resources. I know there's some common questions about what to use, how many resources to use. We'll cover those things. Talk about content, where to start, where to focus, share some testing tips, talk about the utility of practice exams, which are so key for studying, and share some thoughts on accountability and readiness to sit for step two, and then kind of put it all together. And you will, after the webinar, get a sample 4-week study schedule that you can take and customize. And so that will be part of the putting it all together, is taking a look at that and answering any questions you have. So Elite Medical Prep is a personalized tutoring company for medical school exams. So all levels of the USMLE exams, the COMLEX exams, also shelf exams. If you are in medical school studying for your preclinical or during your clinical time or beyond, and you're looking for some tutoring specific to your stage of school, we can do that. There are tutors who do residency matching, advising, kind of career counseling things as well. And then some of those advanced tests, such as step 3, or some of those more advanced tests, are also things down the line that we have tutors who also can teach for. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about mindset. And I think this is often overlooked in studying, sometimes in med school in general, and how medicine is taught, but it is absolutely essential to studying effectively and to the whole project of medical school, which is learning how to learning how to take in new information, because as we know, the field of medicine is evolving. And so the whole project of medical school is, how can you learn how to learn effectively so that you can continue offering the best of knowledge, the best of care to your patients. And so a big principle of this is to know thyself. Why is that important? What do I mean? So take some time to reflect on, what is your actual learning style? Do videos work really well for you? Or are you someone who needs to write things out? Are questions better, or flashcards, or both? Or are you a person who learns best hands-on? All good questions to ask, and really think about what has worked for you in the past, whether that's undergrad or earlier in medical school, and apply those principles, those things that have worked, to however you choose to study for step 2. So we'll talk about some basics and some best practices, but what is the best practice for you? You are such an important component of that, of what is your learning style and what does work for you. Think also about other things, like, are you an introvert or an extrovert? Do you need to go to a coffee shop to get some work done? Or do you need to cut off the outside world and hunker down and really focus on your own, and set yourself up for success by putting yourself in those conditions? Think about when you have the most energy, the most motivation, and put the hardest tasks at those times of your schedule. Think also about your stamina. Are you coming off of, if I can share a brief example, I was coming off of a 13-month clinical year, and the last month being the most intense, and professionally and personal life, like very draining. And so when my dedicated study block started, I just needed to take a few days to not touch anything and like kind of heal and regroup, and then get ready to dive in. So yeah, think about your own stamina. What can you handle per day, per week, per month? And reflect on those signs of burnout in yourself, so that when they do come up, you can identify them quickly and get what you need to be well. Also, I think so helpful to reflect on your why. Why are you in medicine? Which relates to, why are you taking these exams? And keep that in mind. Maybe put a sticky note on your bathroom mirror of, who am I doing this for? Why am I doing this? And keep that in your head, because studying can absolutely be a grind, and having those big picture, meaningful reasons in your head is immensely helpful. Also, maybe read up a little bit on growth mindset, and keep in mind that failures, especially when it comes to studying for an exam like this, are opportunities for growth. They truly are. And every failure points you to knowledge gaps, which helps you to learn and have a more complete foundation of your learning. And really try to embrace that failure as growth mentality, and that everything that you're doing, even the studying itself, the learning how to learn, is such an important part of your development as a physician. And then also just know that you're buckling up for a marathon. And so give yourself breaks, plan your nutrition just like you would for a marathon. Make sure you're getting what you need in your day to day. So a couple other things to keep in mind is to know your school's timeline and also the timeline for residency matching and what you need for that and use that to your advantage. So speaking from my own experience, my school gave us a few months of dedicated time for step one and step two, and we could split it up how we like as long as we got it done by the end of July before residency applications were due. And so most of my peers took the exam pretty much right away, maybe took some breaks, but kind of got it out of the way and then went on with rotations. And I knew that I learn best when I'm actually taking care of people and I can take in the information that way. And so I did a bunch of rotations and then did my step two at the end of that. And so just a few weeks before the deadline, it was helpful for me to use all of that time for studying. And that was much more palatable for me to break it up. And also, I think I learned a lot better that way. And so know your school's timeline, plan to the best plan to take advantage of what you need in that sense. And then also residency application timeline happens in the fall, so late September. And so the recommendations are to allow 8 weeks for scoring of those, which is a bit of a cushion, but you want to be safe if the schools are going to be looking at your scores. And then also know that there can be up to 5 days for transcript processing of your test transcripts. Other matches other than the NRMP may have other deadlines. So if you're interested in something like urology or optho, definitely take a look at those specifically. And then some programs note that you don't necessarily need to have your step two score in, but it is recommended that you do. So just keep all those timelines in mind.
And just to answer the question in the chat, like Kate said, we generally say 8 weeks before the deadline for the NRMP applications. That is conservative. I'd say in my experience, the USMLE will get you your scores back within probably 3 to 4 weeks. I normally tell people at least 6 weeks. So you're looking at mid-August is like the latest you'd want to push it. Okay. But great question.
Mhm. So let's talk a little bit about goal setting. Important to come into studying knowing what score you'd like to hit or what score range you'd like to hit. So I just wanted to share a bit about there is some resources where you can research residency programs. So the AAMC has these resources available, and you can see here there's this range of the middle 80% of applicants invited for interviews in these different programs. And so think about where you want to be in that middle 80%. Helpful things to look up also median scores for residents who match their minimum scores. I would encourage you to aim for that median or higher score for your step two score. But also set smaller goals along the way. So think about, is it percentage of the UWorld question bank that you want to complete? And is that motivating to you? Is it you want to be getting a certain percentage correct on your practice exams? Set these goals along the way, whether it's every week, every month, depending on how you're studying, a few times a week, so that you have goals that you can cheer about as you go and that you can check in on your progress as you go.
Right.
So getting into a bit more of the content and the kind of nuts and bolts of this. Resources that are most recommended, that I would most recommend, we would most recommend, are first and foremost the NBME practice exams. So those are your gold standard of what are questions going to look like and what are questions to practice with. Those are also finite. So be strategic in how you space them out. And we'll talk a little bit more about practice exams, but those are your gold standard. Next up, as far as question banks, and question banks are the best way to go as far as the meat of your studying. UWorld is the next most recommended question bank. They give you some good practice on those lengthy questions. They tend to be fairly challenging questions, and there's a big question bank for you to use. That one is highly recommended. They also have really thorough answers and some great, if you explore their tools to analyze your performance, they have some great ways to do that as well, even down to looking at how you change your answers if you do, and whether you tend to change to the correct answer or you tend to change to the incorrect answer. So, highly recommend UWorld overall. I also recommend Amboss as a content reference. They do have a question bank you can use, and there are some cases I recommend that, but their content reference is really, really excellent. The library that they have, which is searchable, you can also annotate it. You can kind of look by articles, but they have wonderful graphics and sometimes videos. And I think their summaries are so helpful for organizing knowledge. If you're a person who likes charts and tables, likes organizing knowledge by that or copying those down to memorize things. They have all of that. They have some mnemonics here and there. That is a great, great resource. As far as spaced repetition goes, which is the ideal way to get those memorization facts into your mind by spacing out the self-testing over time, the best resource for that is Anki. So there are some decks you can use. EMP, Elite Medical Prep, has some decks you can look at as well. But there are some really, like, for example, on King, some really great, thorough decks you can look at. And there's some nuance to how to use those, but Anki is great for that. Making your own cards is the kind of gold standard of Anki because it's that active learning that you are pulling out what pieces of knowledge are important, which is one factor, and then you're taking the time to write it down on your Anki card, which is also both things that really help you to understand the content and get it into your brain. And then when you're seeing that card over and over in a spaced out manner, really solidifies things. So making your own Anki cards is the gold standard, but there are good decks out there as well. Okay, so practice exams. Again, NBME is the gold standard. Next in line, if you've kind of exhausted all of those, then the UWorld self-assessments are also can be used, can help you with some timing and pacing, just more reps of questions. They are not quite as reliable predictors, so I don't rely as heavy on them, but they are there. Especially if you're looking just to build your test taking stamina. That's a good way to do it. Other resources, first aid is still a reference for some of that foundational step one knowledge that you can go back to if you ever need it. But otherwise, kind of keep things to a minimum. Unless you are like really, really, really a video visual learner, then you can look at some of those video resources. But I would trim down your resources that you're using to definitely NBME. I would highly recommend UWorld, Amboss as a content reference, and Anki if you use Anki. That's kind of where I would generally leave it, supplement as needed. And then, of course, the best resources is your experience, your work in the hospitals, in the clinics. Definitely drawing on those patient experiences is such valuable learning. That's going to be your best resource kind of going forward. So don't discount that.
Yeah. Just to quickly chime in, I completely agree with everything Kate said. I think keeping resources to a minimum is probably the most important thing. We've listed some of our favorite resources. Like Kate said, there are other good resources out there, but less is more for step two. Step one,
Mhm.
as for those who have taken it, you have a million resources, and often you'll find yourself using like five or six. That is pretty standard for step one. But when it comes to step two, question bank, practice tests, maybe something else like a textbook
Mhm.
or videos, Anki, but like don't go crazy. Less is
Mhm.
more for this test. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan.
Yeah.
Okay, a quick question for the audience. So what is the best subject area to start content review? Take a second, answer the question as some answers come in, and we'll look at what folks are saying.
All right. Keep going. We're getting some good participation. I'll give you guys about 25 more seconds. Okay. There definitely is a right answer for this question, just so you all know. And I'm not biased in any way.
No bias. No, of course not.
All right, I'll give you guys 10 more seconds. All right, five, four, three, two, one. Perfect. Okay. Um, there we go. All
So
right.
here's the results. Looks like the majority of people say cardio, but there is a little bit of spread. All right,
This is
let's
the
talk
correct
about it.
answer. That's 100% the correct answer. You guys are all, well, 71% of you are right. So,
I would argue the best area, the best subject area to start content review is what area has the most growth opportunity for you. So maybe that's cardio, but you want to look at what is covered on step two. What are those big chunks, those big topics with high percentages, and then which of those is your weakest? And that is where the most growth opportunity is, where you identify your weaknesses and it's a large portion of the exam. I would say start there, tackle that first. That will give you your kind of highest return on your investment of studying. Um, but of course, you can always start with cardio if you want.
and I think, a lot of you picked cardiology because for the reasons Kate said, it's a huge subject area and it tends to be quite challenging. In my personal experience, I loved cardio as I loved studying. I was awful at like OB and psych. And that's where I started because I knew even though they're lower percentage in terms of representation on the test, that's where I struggled the most. So, like you said, it's very personal. Okay.
And here is just for your perusal. This is the USMLE has this step two content breakdown on their website. So that's where I pulled it from. And this shows you how the different subjects are weighted in the exam. So what tends to show up the most. And so look at renal and repro. That's a big one. Musculoskeletal, cardio, of course, and some other of those thrown in there. So yeah, definitely use this to guide your how you're breaking down that content and what you're starting with, what you're spending the most time on as well.
Yeah, I think that last one, the social sciences ethics section, just for like historical context, when I took step two, which was now like 8 years ago, that was not at all emphasized, like at all. There were like maybe five ethics questions, and if you got them all wrong, you could still get a great score. That is no longer the case. So this is really important for you to figure out what are your strengths, weaknesses, but then also what's the percentage of the test. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah. All right. So another question for folks as we turn it over to Dylan here. So what style of studying should you start with?
Awesome. All right. I'll give you guys a few seconds to chime in, and then Kate, I'll have you take over the polls moving forward. Okay, cool.
Got it.
All right, I'll give you guys about 10 more seconds. And I'm sure you're realizing most of our questions don't truly have any correct answers, but we mostly really just want to get an idea of what you're all thinking.
Mhm.
We'll give you 5 more seconds. All right, beautiful. And let me share this. So it looks like, the majority were saying mixed subjects, about half of you, and then a third were saying both. Um, again, there's no right answer, but I think what we generally recommend is to start with both. And I'll give you an idea of kind of how I counsel students on that. As it says here, is really know yourself, know your strengths, weaknesses, and goals. I'd also factor in your ability to study, like what makes it easier for you to get through the day. And what I mean by that is I've had some students who come in, they're like, Dylan, I'm going to do a week of straight cardiology. That might work for someone. But then in 5 weeks, you may forget all of cardiology, right? And conversely, people may say, I want to do all random systems and subjects on UWorld all the time. And that would be answer choice B, everything's mixed. That's great. But for some people, they may never truly master one specific subject or system. So that's why we recommend both. And a rough recommendation I normally make for people is, let's imagine you're doing 100 questions a day just to make it an easy number. I'll normally tell people, hey, maybe you do 50% of those questions just cardio, and then the other 50% is everything but cardio. And every day you change that focus subject, right? I think there's a lot of benefit in having a little bit of focus studying and a little bit of mixed to not only allow you to develop an expertise in one area, but to also keep it fun and engaging. You're not getting bored with just studying the heart, but then also as a way to maintain expertise as you travel throughout your dedicated study period. So this is really what pros and cons of both. As we said, subject specific, you become a master at something. You really immerse yourself. Whereas mixed subjects, you're kind of representing the test. You're not just going to get 5 cardio questions in a row. You're going to get everything from left field and right field. Um, a lot of step 2, and I'll say a little bit more than step 1, requires you to integrate multi-system processes. There's actually a part of when you get evaluated on practice tests for multi-system disorders. And I cannot stress how underrated that is. Knowing that if someone comes in for chest pain, it's not just cardiac. It could be pulmonary, it could be musculoskeletal, it could be derm. So having a really broad differential and understanding of how organ systems interact with one another. I'm sure you've all seen on social media these classic arguments between cardiologists and nephrologists and if they should give fluid or diurese. Those are questions that will come up on the boards, and you need to understand both sides of the process and how one disease impacts multiple organs. The cons with each, as we said, subject specific, it can be monotonous. You can forget other things. It's not representative of the test. And with mixed subjects, you become kind of a jack of all trades, but not a master of anything. So that's why we think that the true perfect approach is have a little bit of both. Targeted focus each day, allow yourself to really hone in on the subjects you struggle with, but then mix subjects simultaneously to mimic test day and to also keep it fresh and not let you forget some of the things that you've studied previously. But again, know yourself. I have some students who say, Dylan, one day before the test, I'm going to study all of X subject, and that's it, because they know they struggle with rashes, for example. I just want to do one last review of rashes because it's going to come in my brain, and then the day after the test, I'm never going to remember it. That's fine. So just know yourself and know what your strengths and weaknesses are.
Mhm. And Simran, that ties a little bit into your question as well, of what is content review and how to do it for step 2. I would say generally the strategy for content review is questions, questions, questions. And then if there is a specific topic within questions that's coming up that you're not able to build a foundation of understanding based on the answers you're getting, then that's when you can go and reference say your Amboss content library, or a video or a textbook, or a paper, and or review, your clinical notes or things on that. But really letting the questions guide your content review for the most part. And we'll circle back to the rest of your question at the end.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Kate. The questions are important for you learning what you do know, but more importantly for what you don't know. Something I think we'll touch on. If we don't, we'll bring it up at the end. Is learning how to review a question is a skill, and it's a skill that a lot of students do not pay any attention to. They go, oh, I've read the UWorld explanation, I'm good to go. You actually don't need to read every UWorld explanation in its entirety for every question. If you do, you will get bored to death, and it's gonna take you 15 hours just to get through one block. So there's a lot of skill in knowing how well you did on this question and allowing that to direct how much do I really need to review here? Or did I like knock this out of the park and I can just click next? Or hey, you really struggled with that. Let's figure out where you struggled and do I need to write this down and review it with first aid or some step up to medicine or something down the road. A great point.
Mhm.
So it kind of goes into what we were just alluding to is test taking skills. Um, a lot of the process of studying for step 2 for most students is volume. Like I just need to crank through the 3,000 or 4,000 UWorld questions, get them done. I'm going to be good. And that is 100% a big part of becoming a good step twos taker and getting a great score for residency. There is so much skill when it comes to all of these board exams, step one, two, and three, and then when you go on and take your boards for your subspecialties. It's knowing how the writers think, what they're going to show you, what are the common presentations, and recognizing that what we actually see in the hospital does not always present itself on the boards. A short anecdote is I was tutoring a student the other day, and we were going over a question where someone came in with tachycardia, and it was basically getting at what's the rhythm or what's the arrhythmia based off the physical exam alone. And the patient or the student picked ventricular tachycardia, and it was incorrect. And she was like, well, couldn't you come in with VT, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yes, I know many patients who have heart disease who come in with VT and they walk into the office and they're okay. But on the boards, they're never going to give you that patient. If they have VT, they are passing out and you are running a code, right? But we know that's not real life, but it's going to be too challenging for them to write a question like that and then say, hey, this is VT that's with a pulse, which is a thing that exists, but they're never going to test you on it. So these are the things you want to know. What are the common presentations? If I see buzzwords, the writers are trying to tell me something. Simultaneously, they're going to give you words that are there to trick you. And you want to do enough questions and really think about how they're portraying these patients so that you can pick up on the clues of where they're trying to lead you. Eliminating incorrect answers by focusing on what's explicitly stated. You always should focus on what's the right answer. But a lot of the time, I would argue at least 50% of the time, you will not know what the right answer is. But I think the majority of the time, you'll be able to look at 5 answer choices and say, I know these 3 are wrong. And that is a skill in itself, is saying, why is that answer wrong? A lot of times you'll just cross stuff out and be like, yeah, that's wrong. Yeah, that's wrong. Because subconsciously, you know it's wrong. But it's important for you to explicitly state while you're preparing for the test, why is it wrong? If you cannot give a good reason, I don't think you should be crossing it out. Mostly because I want you to then go back and review that answer and be like, I don't know why it was wrong. I just knew it was wrong. That's not sufficient enough. So really rule out answers with intention. I kind of hinted on this or talked about this third bullet point. The phrasing matters a lot. Um, and then time management. Step 2 is a block longer than step 1. I remember when I took step 2, that extra block killed me. I was like so tired. I was so fatigued. And there is 100% value in developing your stamina throughout your dedicated period. That being said, someone wrote earlier that they're not taking this test until mid-August. Does that mean you should be going 100% every day from April until August? No. But you will want to slowly ramp that up. We do have a recommendation for daily timed question sets. But if you're 4 months out, you don't need to be doing 40 question blocks timed nonstop all the time because you've got time to develop that stamina. Maybe you want to do things on tutor mode now to develop those test taking skills in a low pressure environment. So you will need to do timed questions, but think about where you are in your journey for step 2. Read the question being asked and the answer choices first. Again, understand what they're asking you. If the question it reads, what's the next best step? And then you read the vignette and you're like, oh, this person has an MI, and it's actually a STEMI. The real question is, when you have a patient with a STEMI, what do you do next? Right? And most people can answer that without reading the rest of the clinical vignette. So you really want to know, what are they actually asking you? Again, what's the best pharmacotherapy for this patient? It could be, what's the actual question could be, in someone with depression and concomitant metabolic syndrome, what's the best antidepressant to use? So you really want to think about what they're actually asking you. And then the last thing we have here is flagging. Flagging can be great. It can also be horrendous. I was someone who flagged 50% of the questions for absolutely no reason. It's useless. Don't do it. My advice now is, if you're going to flag a question, you need to be able to confidently say, if I come back to this question and spend 30 more seconds on it, it actually may make a difference. If you see a question and you're like, Dylan, if I had 30 years to sit with this question, I'd never get it right, do not flag it. Guess and move on with your life. So just be careful and judicious with how you flag. Okay. Kate, you have anything to add here?
Right, that's excellent. Yeah, if there are questions that are totally stumping you, just move on. Um, yeah, and if yeah, I just so important. I did the same thing and such a skill that develops over time of knowing what will time make a difference in. And so as you get closer to the test, doing more and more timed question sets really is helpful for figuring out those nuances, those test taking skills.
Yeah. So like Kate mentioned, we cannot stress the utility of practice exams. So the NBME has many practice exams that are available. They are, from the manufacturer, that's the gold standard. Now, importantly, as Kate said, this is a finite resource. So this is not something that you want to say, I'm going to take 7 practice exams in the first 2 weeks of studying. It's not useful. So some of the things that we recommend is consider a baseline exam. Um, I think that's a good recommendation for most people. And what I normally advise students on is you're going to take this exam and just know you're going to do poorly. Like that, you haven't studied yet. So you just want to get it out of the way, get the nerves out of the way, and say, look, I took one. You now know what it's going to feel like on test day. But the goal is not to be like, oh man, I should be passing by now. That's not it. The goal is just to get one out of the way and establish a baseline. You're going to get a report like you can see here, and it's going to tell you a little bit about your score and essentially the national average. And it will tell you in block format, are you below, above, or about the same? So this can give you a little bit of advice and guidance on where to structure your studying throughout the time. But again, that first baseline test should just be to get the nerves out of the way, to check that box, say you did one, and then to help you guide your studying a little bit more. We wrote weekly-ish practice exams. We say that because if you're like whoever mentioned that they're taking this in August, you've got a lot of time. If you do weekly practice exams now, you're going to run out by like the end of May. So think about how much time you have leading up to your test and space it out. What I generally recommend is in the last few weeks or however close to test day, you start to ramp up the number of practice tests you do. So for someone going in August, you could say maybe I'm going to take a baseline and then I won't take another one for like 3 weeks. And then maybe it'll be another 3 weeks, then 2 weeks, then weekly, and then maybe twice a week. So you really try to increase the amount that you're doing as you get closer to test day to simulate what's going to happen when you take your test, but also you're going to be like, oh, I've been doing this, nonstop for the past 2 weeks. I'm ready to go. This just feels like it's another day of studying. As I said, the results inform where you should spend your time. Building stamina is key, and it really, it's going to assess your readiness. It's going to give you a score. It's going to give you a range, and importantly, don't expect linear progress. There will be many times where you are like, let's say 205, 205, 205, and you're sitting there being like, what's wrong? I'm studying. In my experience, almost every student I've worked with needs to accrue like a critical mass of information. And once they hit that threshold, then I see their scores go up. It is not like when I'm working with them every other week, they're taking a test, we go up by 5 points. I've never actually seen that happen. Just know that it's slow progress in the beginning and then things will start to click. Um, if you do have linear progress, fantastic. That's great for you. But I just want you to know that's definitely the minority of students that I've seen that in. Okay. All
And
right.
Simran, hopefully that answers the other part of your question is this is where a baseline practice exam can be useful. On the other hand, all this is individualized. If you know you have certain weak spots, you can start studying them, refresh, review a little bit, then take your practice exam if you have the time to do that for your baseline and go from there. So there's some flexibility there for sure. But this is where you can really identify that growth opportunity. So, for example, for this person, I would probably say the blood and lymphoreticulaire immune systems is a great place to start studying because that's a weak point and a high percentage of content covered on the exam.
Yeah. Great. Um, accountability is a big thing. I know if you're on medical school, you're probably type A and you want to do the best that you can, as we all do. But being consistent and being accountable is really important. Um, I I tell my students whenever I work with them, I give them a daily schedule. This is how many questions you're going to do. This is how we're going to break it down. And you want to have those goals made for every day. It should not be, I need to be scoring 90% every day because that's going to drive you crazy. But start off with small goals, being like, these are the number of questions I want to do each day. I want to make sure I budget enough time for gym, for friends, for my partner, but have goals that are on a daily basis and then more lofty goals on a weekly to monthly basis when it comes to practice tests. Work with friends, ask someone to hold you accountable, and it can be as extreme as you want it to be. I've had students who say, Dylan, I'm going to email you every night saying these are the number of questions I did and my percentages, just so I stay consistent. And I don't even respond to the email. I just send a thumbs up right back. But it keeps them accountable. So whatever you need to do to stay on track, we'll support because we want to make sure you're getting through what you need to do well on this test. All right, so we're going to ask another question here. When are you ready to sit for step two? A is one test with desired specialty median, at least two tests with the specialty median, one test with desired specialty minimum, and then at least two tests with the minimum.
Okay, we'll give it about 10 more seconds. Go ahead and get those answers in. Last few. All right.
Perfect. So the majority of you said at least two tests with the desired specialty median, and then a minority of you said at least two tests with the desired specialty minimum. So we agree with the majority of you that you want to be in the desired specialty median. Okay, we want you to be kind of middle of the road. Um, Now that I'm in fellowship and when I was in residency, I sat on committees to review residency applicants. Um, I have never seen or heard of a discussion being like, wow, that person crushed step two. We totally should interview them. It's very much a holistic process. So, what we normally say is, hey, you're kind of in our range, and that is a checkbox, and then we move on and look at the rest of your application. Um, the minimum, truthfully, is probably okay too. Now, we want you to be within that 80% range. If you're outside of it, that can raise some red flags on the lower side. If you're on the higher end, I guess that could raise red flags too. But if you're on the lower end, that could sometimes be a deciding factor between make or break. For example, if you're a student who is at the very bare minimum and you have similar qualifications as to someone else who got a median score, that difference could really tip you over and have that one applicant selected over you. So you want to be aiming for the median for your specialty, but also for the programs that you're interested in. Okay, so that's why that link that Kate mentioned earlier, look at the programs. You're like, hey, these are some places I'm interested in. Let me see their scores. That'll help you figure out where you need to be. And you need it at least twice. Data is super important. An N of one means nothing. It means a good pat on the back, but it's not a handshake. You're ready to go and take the test yet. We need to see at least two, ideally more. So just to wrap things up, this is a screenshot of example schedule. I'm not going to leave this up for too long because we're going to send this out to you. Our example schedule gives you an idea of what you can do over 4 weeks. But more importantly, I would focus a little bit more of how we structure our days, how we recommend the days to be structured, because just sitting there and doing 40 question blocks is not sustainable for a long time. You will get very bored. So there is some variety that you want to include. And we have an example in this schedule for you guys. Again, we're going to send this out. So don't feel like you have to screenshot it or read it all, write it all down right now. Okay. So Kate, do you want to wrap up and then we'll go for questions?
Love to. So just final reminders that this testing, this standardized test is really just part of that learning how to learn. And this is training. And so everything that you're putting into this will pay off through the rest of your career. So be encouraged by that and also be encouraged by your reasons for being in medicine. Keep that close in mind these days. Also, be thoughtful about your goals, especially when it comes to knowing yourself and what works for you and your life, and your goals for residency and beyond. And then build in margin. So for the score that you're aiming for the timeline of taking your test, for the rest that you need on a daily or weekly basis, build in margin, build in some cushion for yourself. And stay consistent is absolutely so important. And also staying connected to family, to friends, to your community. Absolutely. This can be a time of being pretty separated and pretty isolated, but stay connected in the little ways and in the big ways throughout this time. And also, we're here if you need us. If we can be a point of connection for you, a point of encouragement, a point of expertise, know that we are available and happy to work with you. So yeah, keep in mind if you run into trouble or you want to talk more about these things. So now we'll open the floor for questions. I see one from Katie in the chat. I'm gonna read it through. If you don't feel ready by August, is it advisable to take step 2 in August, or is it okay to take step 2 in September? Do programs still filter applications? I think Dylan, you probably have a little bit more experience on this.
Sure. So, like I said earlier, and before I answer this, just as you guys are listening and you think of questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them one by one. So don't feel like you need to wait until we're finished responding to ask us something, okay? But like I said earlier, Katie, I think it's always in your best interest to have that step 2 score in your application the day that programs can download your residency application. The reason I say that is because what will often happen is you'll be able to submit your application on one day. And then a few days later, the program directors then have access to them. What I know some program directors do is they'll log into their dashboard and they hit download. And they download a PDF copy of everyone who submitted an application to them. And then they never open that dashboard again. Okay, so they will just get all the applications and then they'll go and review them and they'll get all their data and they'll put it all into a spreadsheet and they'll start analyzing it. So you may then enter their database not having a step 2 score. And that may be something that they filter you out on. They may say, look, you don't have a step 2 score. We're not going to look at you. Now, that being said, the counter argument is I've had some students who don't get it in on time. And then when they do get their score, they email every program that they applied to saying, my score is now available. I want you to be aware. That is something you will have to do if you don't have your step 2 score. I don't advise that because a lot of the times they won't read your email. And then you kind of don't have an opportunity at that program. So again, 6 weeks minimum, 8 weeks ideally, before that September deadline to take step 2. The next question is, does the order of taking the NBME practice exams really matter? Kate, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, great question. I would say yes. So step 2 kind of evolves over time. And so the most recent practice exams are going to be most reflective, or hopefully will be, of actual testing conditions. So I would save those for the end. If I were going back and studying again, yeah, I would plan out about how many tests I want to take, start with the older ones first and work up. That being said, if you are taking practice tests more to build your stamina, maybe not quite as important. But again, these tests do develop, and the newer ones tend to have longer question stems, which is probably what you're going to see on step 2. So I would say generally work from older to newer, or if you're going to be taking a more limited number of practice exams, prioritize those newer versions, which are those higher number NBME exams. Anything to add, Dylan?
No, I think that's spot on. I normally tell people start with the older ones just because they're a little bit out of date, but that doesn't mean they're useless. But then as you get closer, the more recent ones are more reflective of what you'll actually see.
Mhm. Next question says, if you feel like your UWorld scores are not improving and it feels like there might be a knowledge gap, how would I be able to review the content without going too deep? Is there a particular resource that would be preferable other than first aid? This is a great question. I think um, I'll share a little bit and then Dylan, please jump in. But I would say make some notes during your during your question sets of what are topics that you really want to cover, and then go through, if you have Amboss, go to Amboss, read those articles, get familiar with what's going on. If you're a note taker, take some notes on the highlights, the key points, the key presentation, and let that be your review. And then as well, if there are resources that are particularly helpful or particularly pertinent, you can go back to those. So for example, when I was reviewing the surgery content for step 2, I went back to my surgery textbook that I used and knew well, and that was really helpful to me because it was familiar. And those diagrams I was able to remember and keep those in mind. And that was efficient studying for me. So it is definitely individualized, but kind of summarizing what I said, make a few notes throughout your question bank session of what you really want to hone in on and what you need to review, and then dive into, I would recommend Amboss first. And then if you are needing more, pick your favorite resource. But again, trying to limit resources.
Yeah, I completely agree with Kate. I think the one thing I'll add is you really need to think about what type of knowledge you're missing. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. I'm sorry, all of my examples are cardiology focused, but that's what I know mostly about. So let's imagine you're trying to learn the antiarrhythmic drugs. Okay, that is like memorization. That is content that you just sit there and you memorize. That is something that's great, like Anki, or something like a first aid, where you just read it, you learn it, you have to memorize it. I'm going to contrast that greatly with cardiovascular hemodynamics, right? When you think about hemodynamics and you think about valvular disease, it's so much easier to understand the hemodynamics rather than trying to memorize, oh, with this valve disease, I have these changes. With this valve, you can predict all that stuff if you just understand it. That's a concept you want to understand. That's perfect for like a video, right? Have someone teach that to you. Truthfully, a tutor is great. AI can sometimes walk you through that well too. But that's not something you can just go and read in a textbook and expect to memorize. That's an understanding a topic or a concept. So make sure you can delineate the difference between the two, because that will then direct you to what type of resource you should be using. Okay. Same thing I always talk about with the kidney and all the different transporters and channels in the different parts of the kidney. That is a lot of memorization, but there is some physiology to that too. So I think you want a combination of rote memorization, but then conceptual understanding.
Mm.
What
Any
other
other
questions?
questions out there? Here's another one. How does time management change with the new format of step 2? 16 blocks of 30 minutes each. That is a
Um,
great question.
Yeah, so this is all change for us in terms of
Mhm.
the timing of questions. Truthfully, it doesn't really change anything that I tell my students to do. The reason being is when I advise my students, I never tell them to do 40 question blocks. The reason I say that is because back, when you have the original testing, which is 40 question blocks, you would do the 40 questions and then you would never see them again. When you're studying, you have to do 40 questions and then you have to review 40 questions. And it is a grind, it is a slog. So I always told my students do 20 question blocks, and then review them and then take a break. Because that to me is essentially the same amount of time as a 40 question block. So maybe I'm going to start recommending 10 question blocks. I probably won't because I think 10 is a little short. But a 20 question block you can do in 30 minutes, approximately 30 minutes, and then review in 30 minutes. I think most people can study for an hour and then take a break after that. So my recommendation has always been 20 question blocks, and I'll probably keep it that way. But Kate, I'd love to hear what you think.
Mm. Yeah. I would say this is a lot of this is dependent on kind of learner style as well. So, for example, if you're needing to build up stamina, you can really focus in and work that muscle. And so how I approached step two was, all right, I'm gonna see what kind of stamina I have. I'm gonna do a few blocks right off the bat and kind of get through it and then give myself a longer break. And that was more helpful for me to kind of get space, get air. And so that could be a strategy as well, just to offer like another perspective of doing, you could continue studying for longer chunks and really work that muscle and that time management skill of how do I filter through longer questions and shorter questions and flagging questions and building up the mental stamina, honestly, for just reading that fast and thinking that fast, that those longer sets could be helpful. But I like what you said, Dylan, about the 20 question blocks really being a little bit more similar to the test taking situation, the test taking scenario of 30-minute blocks, and also to studying for about an hour and then taking a break and coming back. That sounds very sustainable.
Yeah. And then Carlos, you said, do you think I am at a time for September application for step two and getting my LORs? I presume you mean, do you think if you're starting to think about all of that, like, I guess if I'm answering the question correctly, please let me know. But where you are now, obviously you should be thinking about step two sometime this summer. Again, early to mid-August is the absolute latest. In terms of letters of recommendation, I would say by the end of this academic year, and early into the next one is when you want to have them solidified. And the reason I say that is because I know some people will get letters during their last year, like sub internships or their clerkships. So you want to schedule those early in June and July, and August the latest. But there may be some people who you worked with during your first clinical year that you made a great relationship with. Feel free to ask them now. But know that like this summer is busy because you're taking step two. You may, if depending on where you are in your med school journey, you may be doing clerkships and sub-Is now that also simultaneously require you to get a letter. But if you're starting de novo right now, you've still got time to take step two. Don't worry.
And also with the letters, I would say folks, preceptors that you work with are expecting to be asked about letters generally. That's how this works. And it can be helpful for preceptors to write those letters close to when you worked with them. So, for example, I knew I was going to take a year off. And so when I was completing sub-Is, I asked a few folks to write me letters then. But I won't be using those until I'm applying this cycle. So they're kind of already written. They have them. We communicated about that. And I'll kind of touch back in as we're getting closer to the application time. So several ways you can do it. If there's someone you just worked with, who you know you want to write a letter, it's okay to ask them now. They can hang on to that in a Word document or something. And it's great while it's fresh in their mind.
Before we answer this last question, I just want to be mindful of time. Kate and I are going to stay on. We'll continue to answer your questions, but we have this information up here. If you need assistance and you want to meet with us or meet with any of their tutors at EMP, this is our email address, info@eliteMedicalPrep.com. So you can reach out to us to set up a time to chat. We're going to be sending this webinar and this 4-week study planner out, but there are the links as to where this webinar will eventually be posted, and we have many others that I've been a part of, Kate will be a part of, and on different topics. And then it includes everything from interviewing to letters of rec to step one to everything. So please check them out. Feel free to stay on if you have more questions because we'll keep answering them. But if you need to dip out, thank you so much for joining us. It was great speaking with you all, and please let us know if we can help. Okay.
I second all of that.
Kate, do you want to take this question?
Absolutely. If I get my letters later than September, can I add them later to my application? Would they still matter? I would kind of go back to what you said earlier, Dylan, how some folks kind of download the applications immediately, and that so know that that might happen. Um, yeah, but again, you can like was said earlier, you can email programs with an update like that. But generally, the recommendation that I've received and that I will pass along is to have your application complete a few days before that day that programs start looking and downloading all of the applications. I would have everything in probably 3 days before that day, if at all possible.
Yeah, completely agree, Kate. Any other questions? Anything else we can answer? There are no silly questions, so even if it's like, what is UWorld? We will help you answer that.
Hmm.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. We appreciate it. We'll stay
Hmm.
on if you have any other questions, but feel free to sign off if you're tired and you want to go to bed. Um, and we'll stick on for a few more minutes in case anyone has any other questions. So Simran has a question. Can you give an example of how to review questions quickly? It's easier when I have a question, but I'll tell you kind of the important things that I tell students to look for. When you're going through a question, a way for you to know that you're on the right track is, let's imagine there's five answer choices. If you rule out three of them and you're between two answers and you pick an answer and it's wrong, you then look at the percentages of what people picked afterwards. Your goal should be to be always selecting the top two answers. Okay. If you can do that, so let's imagine you rule out three and each of those are like 3%. And then the right answer is 70%, and the next one is like 20%. If you pick the 20%, but the other one you were considering was the 70% one, that's very good. That's a sign that you knew what was going on. You probably understood the question, but you were likely missing a piece of information. In that instance, you don't need to review the question in its entirety. You probably knew 80 to 85% of what's going on, but you didn't know one fact. Look for that fact in the answer explanation. And then, based on your level of comfort, and this is something I'll normally work on in my sessions with students, you may be able to skip the answer explanations for the incorrects if you ruled them out confidently. Let's contrast that with a situation where you pick the answer you picked was wrong, 3%, and you crossed out the right answer that was 70%. That's a red flag. You are very much off the right path. You're in a different continent. Slow down. In that instance, you need to take time to figure out, where did I go wrong? Did I miss something conceptually in the question that I've never seen before? It's a topic I'm really confused about. That's a sign of, hey, you need to slow down, and maybe I need to actually review this later, even after reading the entire answer explanation. There's a lot more nuance and granularity of those. Those are the two extremes of things. But that's a general idea of how I guide people and advise them on how to review questions. You probably won't be on the end of the spectrum where you're crossing out the right answer every time. And that's good. But when that happens, you got to do it. And conversely, if you're picking between the top two answers every time, you are golden. You should be happy about that. When you get a question wrong like that, be proud of that. And know that you just missed one little piece of information, and that's okay. You'll learn that. Kate, do you have any other tips on how to review or?
That was great. All that I would add is to look at that at the bottom of every UWorld question explanation. There's a kind of like key takeaway,
Yeah.
a summary of what you should know for this content. And so I would recommend making sure you know that after like if you've done any other review that you needed for that question, great. Or if you nailed it, great. But read that what I should know piece at the bottom and make sure you get that and then move on.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's a great point. All right. Any other questions? Yeah, no problem.
Wonderful. So happy we could be here this evening. Wishing you all the best on your educational journeys, your medical journeys. Good luck in this season of studying. Yeah, again, reach out if there is if you want to talk more. Again, free consultations. So happy to talk more or specifics. Yeah. Thank you everyone again for coming.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening, okay?
Mhm. Take care.
Bye bye.